I still remember the smell of lemon polish on the mahogany table in his lawyer's office. I remember the ticking clock, too slow, too loud. I remember the way he sat across from me, composed, confident, avoiding eye contact, like I was some intern in a performance review instead of his wife of 10 years. He slid the papers across the table like it was a transaction. No preamble, no regret. Just, it's better for both of us this way. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat had closed like my body had decided silence was safer than screaming then. The lawyer, a woman I had seen twice before, once at our wedding, once at a barbecue, didn't look at me either. She pointed at the dotted line and explained things I already knew. No alimony, no assets, no stake in the company. Just a clean break. The company we built, or rather the company I funded, promoted, breathed life into. Not legally mine. Never legally mine. He made sure of that. The papers were cold, precise, and final. I signed them anyway. I didn't ask questions. I didn't beg. I didn't accuse. My hands were steady. My voice, when I finally found it, simply said, "You'll get what you want." That was the last time we spoke, at least directly. I left the building not knowing where I would sleep that night. Our apartment, the one under his name, was already rekeyed. My key had stopped working that morning. He'd planned this. He'd timed it down to the lock. That was the part that made me nauseous. Not the divorce itself, but the efficiency of my removal. I wasn't a person anymore. I was an inconvenience to be managed out of the system. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel much. Just a static emptiness, like someone had hit the mute button on my life. I walked. I don't remember how long. I ended up in a cheap hotel with a cracked bathroom mirror and sheets that smelled like old soap. I laid there in the dark shoes, still unstaring at the ceiling, like maybe it held some secret. I kept replaying the look on his face, not cruel, just calculated. He didn't hate me. He didn't love me either. I was just a phase he'd outgrown, a resource he'd exhausted. And I let him. That part stuck. That part stayed. He used to call me his marketing genius. Said I had a gift for storytelling, for making people believe in something they couldn't see yet. That's how we met, actually, back when I worked as a senior strategist at a mid-sized agency downtown. He was charming, ambitious, and had a dream too big for the salary he earned. I liked that about him. I admired the way he spoke about his idea like it was a revolution. And when he asked me to help him pitch it to investors, I did. Not because I owed him anything, but because I believed in him. Because I thought we were building something bigger than either of us. The truth is, I didn't just help him pitch it. I wrote every word. I designed the decks refined. The pitch coached him through every investor call. When we got our first, maybe I cashed out my 401k and gave him the seed money myself. "We're betting on us," I said. He kissed my forehead and called me brave. My boss told me I was insane. By the time the company launched, I had left my job. He said he needed me full-time, someone he trusted, someone who understood the vision. I didn't hesitate. I built the brand from scratch. Every tagline, every campaign, every metric win. We celebrated it was my work, and he told everyone that. At first, I was the invisible co-founder, the heartbeat. That's what he called me, until he didn't. When things started growing fast, so did his circle. Advisors, board members, a CFO I didn't recognize. His tone changed. He started calling me support instead of strategy. Asked me to sit out of pitch meetings, said it would look better if it came from a single voice. I told myself it was temporary, that he was protecting the brand, that this was our win, ours. I started to notice things, a new assistant with a password. I didn't have documents filed without my review conversations that paused when I walked into the room. But I said nothing. I thought if I stayed loyal, if I worked harder, he'd come back to the US we used to be. Looking back, I realize how much I gave away for free. Not just money, not just time. I gave away authorship, voice, value. I convinced myself that love meant silence, that partnership meant sacrifice. I wore that delusion like armor. And by the time he started building his escape plan, I was already unarmed. It started small. A signature on a vendor contract I hadn't approved. A budget reroute that didn't match our previous conversations. I asked him about it once casually over dinner. He smiled and said, "Oh, it's just easier to run these things through legal now. You've got enough on your plate." He refilled my wine glass like that would wash down the dismissal, and I let it. Again. But the distance grew. The way he answered questions like I was interrupting. The way he triple-checked my decisions in front of interns. There was a meeting, one I wasn't invited to, where they launched a new campaign I'd never seen. My campaign watered down, rebranded under someone else's name. I watched the announcement video alone in our apartment, with my name spelled wrong in the thank you slide. I didn't cry, I just stared at the screen until it faded to black. That's when I started reading everything. Quietly, carefully. I stayed late at the office when no one else was around. I checked the drive logs, the payroll structure, the contracts filed under subsidiaries I didn't know existed. There were documents assigning equity, none of them to me. There were letters of intent with investors who never met me. I wasn't just being edged out, I was being erased. One day, I opened a file misnamed Sloppily Buried and found a legal memo discussing the benefits of structuring the company as a sole proprietorship under his name only. The date on it was from 2 years ago. 2 years, that was the year I took out a second mortgage to cover a production delay. That was the year he promised me equity would come once we stabilize. He was already planning the exit, already calculating what I'd be worth once I wasn't useful anymore. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. I wasn't ready to be angry. I was still cataloging my disbelief. I wasn't trying to punish him. I was trying to understand how long he'd been pretending to love me. That was the part that stuck in my throat, the performance. The way he'd tuck my hair behind my ear in front of friends. The way he'd say we in public and I behind closed doors. I started documenting everything, quietly, meticulously. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it, only that I needed a record, a reality check. He noticed, of course, not the documentation, but the stillness in me. He asked if I was okay. I told him I was tired. He kissed my cheek like he used to and said, "You're my rock, you know that." It almost worked. Almost. But something in his voice didn't match his eyes. It was rehearsed, calculated, like he was keeping me warm until the final move was ready. So I waited. I smiled. I packed my doubt into neat compartments. I became quiet enough to be overlooked, invisible enough to go unnoticed. And that was exactly what I needed. The official blow didn't come in the form of an argument. It arrived by courier. A thick envelope stamped and sealed at the front desk of the office where I no longer had a parking space. I opened it in the conference room, our conference room, the one I decorated with my own hands. Inside were divorce papers, a clean break, no shared assets, no claims to the company, no explanation. Just a cold recitation of terms. At the bottom, his signature. Dated a week ago, filed already. I stared at the paper like it was a math problem I'd already solved. It wasn't a betrayal anymore. It was a blueprint. Everything I'd suspected, everything I'd quietly confirmed, it was all there in ink now. Legal, strategized, executed. That night, I didn't scream. I didn't call him. I just poured myself a drink and pulled out my laptop. I reread the documents. Then I opened the folder I'd been building, every email, every invoice, every file with metadata proving my contribution. I compared the formation date of the company with the wire transfers from my account. I built a timeline, not just for me, but for anyone who might one day need to see it. I didn't tell my friends. Most of them had drifted anyway. They liked the version of me who posted anniversary photos and founder milestones, not the version silently unraveling behind curated captions. And I didn't want pity. I wanted clarity. That weekend, I drove 3 hours to meet with a friend from my old agency days, someone who now worked in financial compliance. I didn't tell her everything. I didn't have to. I just asked questions about shell companies, misreported income, and how equity transfers are tracked or not tracked when someone's intentionally burying records. She looked at me for a long time before saying, "You're not asking as a victim. You're asking as a strategist." I smiled for the first time in weeks. After that, I opened new folders, one named Audit, one named Exit. I started looking into public records cross-referencing tax filings, checking the discrepancy between personal expenses and corporate reporting. The numbers didn't add up, not just ethically, legally. The irony was that the man who used to call me his marketing genius had never bothered to hide the trail. He thought I wouldn't look, that I wouldn't understand, that I'd be too heartbroken or too polite to investigate. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was clear. I filed my own paperwork the following week, clean, professional, and strategically timed. I declined mediation. I didn't contest the division. I just signed what he wanted, and I made sure to smile when I handed the documents back. He looked surprised, maybe even relieved, like he thought he'd won. But I wasn't interested in winning the argument. I was focused on winning the war. He moved fast after the paperwork was finalized. My name disappeared from the website the next morning. The team I used to mentor stopped replying to messages. A few of them unfollowed me online, subtle but deliberate. Invitations stopped coming. Mutual friends stayed mutual only in theory. I wasn't just divorced, I was erased. In this space we had built together, I no longer existed. I didn't try to fight it. I let the silence expand around me like a cocoon. It hurt less than I expected, maybe because I had already lost them before the papers ever came. Maybe because the worst part wasn't being excluded, it was realizing how easily people step over the woman who's no longer useful. I spent those weeks in the same small apartment I'd moved into after he changed the locks. It was nothing like the high-rise we used, to share no view, no marble countertops, but it was mine. I started working part-time for a friend's startup, mostly in the background. Strategy decks, quiet positioning, nothing public, nothing ambitious. I didn't want to build, I wanted to observe, to breathe without performance. What I didn't expect was the rumors. I'd hear from someone, always someone at a distance, that I had walked away, that I gave up too soon, that maybe I was never really involved in the first place. Some even said I had mental health issues, that he'd been supportive for years and eventually had to choose himself. I didn't correct them. Let them believe it. Let them believe I was small, broken, unstable, that I was another failed wife who couldn't handle success. That was safer for me. I needed to be underestimated. Because while they were rewriting my story, I was studying his. His company was scaling too fast, too wide. I saw the warning signs because I'd lived through them once before. Overhead, increasing margins. Tightening investors, circling like sharks. I started reaching out to people I used to know, not with accusations, but with curiosity. A casual email to a former mentor here. A coffee with an early investor there. I listened more than I spoke. People want to talk when they think you have nothing left to take. And what I heard confirmed everything I suspected. He had restructured the company 3 times in 2 years, all in ways that funneled control toward him and liability toward the brand. His CFO had changed twice. The last one left quietly after only 6 months. The board was growing restless, but no one wanted to be the first to pull out. And buried beneath the charm and clean press releases, the numbers didn't lie. But I wasn't just looking for financial cracks. I was looking for proof that what I gave had been real and that what he built was now rotting from within. I found it on a public database, an IRS notice. Not yet publicized, not yet enforced, but pending. Something small, a discrepancy in payroll filings, enough to raise a flag. Enough for me to dig deeper. It wasn't just negligence, it was deliberate, and I knew exactly where to go with that. The first email I sent wasn't to him. It was to a mid-level IRS agent I'd found through a public whistleblower contact line. I didn't introduce myself with drama. I didn't declare revenge. I attached a spreadsheet, then a zip folder, then a 4-sentence summary explaining the payroll anomalies vendor shell companies and personal expenses disguised as consulting fees. The subject line was simple, flagged discrepancies. Anonymous tip. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke clearly. The next step was messier. I'd spent months quietly collecting contact information for a handful of early investors who had since exited the company, many of them disgruntled, others just weary. I reached out with caution. Some ignored me, but 2 agreed to meet. One remembered the early days, remembered me. said I had the sharpest instincts in the room and that my disappearance had never felt clean. That was all I needed. I didn't ask them to wage war. I just asked questions. I painted the bigger picture, how the structure had changed, how the leadership now operated more like a monarchy than a board. I asked about their share status and whether they'd considered divesting entirely. And slowly, quietly, I began buying in, through a trust, through a silent partner, through paperwork that didn't bear my name. I wasn't interested in control, not yet. I just wanted proximity, access, leverage, and most of all, timing. Because while I was laying the groundwork, the audit I triggered started to gain traction. I kept tabs on the company's communications through old access points they never disabled. The panic wasn't public yet, but I could feel it: meetings, doubling legal consults, increasing morale cracking. They were preparing for something. They just didn't know from where it was coming. Then, one Friday afternoon, I received an email I never expected from him. Short, rushed. "Hey, any chance you'd be open to meeting just coffee? No pressure. Need to discuss something that might affect you." I didn't reply. Not for 3 days. Let him stew. Let him remember what it felt like to be invisible. When I finally responded, I offered a time and a neutral location. He showed up early, dressed for charm, but not for crisis. His smile was strained, his voice carefully casual, but his eyes gave it away, tight, scanning, calculating. He didn't waste time. There's been some confusion with our counts. A hold from the IRS. Temporary, I'm sure. But it's complicated. I said nothing. He continued. There's a signature they're requesting. Yours. Something tied to an early vendor contract. You authorized something from the launch year. Without it, the freeze won't lift. I stirred my coffee slowly. You mean the year I wasn't a co-founder? The year you made sure my name was nowhere official? His jaw tensed. Rachel, please. This isn't personal. I looked at him for the first time in months. Really looked and saw the desperation flickering under his carefully constructed expression. That's the thing I said. It was never personal for you, but it was always business for me. He blinked, confused. I smiled, not cruel, just precise. And then I stood up. That was the moment I realized the twist wasn't that he needed me now. The twist was that he never expected I'd still know how to be dangerous. The next morning, he sent a follow-up email. Polite, pressing. Just wanted to see if you've had a chance to think about signing the document. Timing is tight. Let me know what you need from me to make this work. He attached a scan of the IRS request. My name clear as day, next to a vendor agreement I'd created in year 1. The only document they hadn't forged, the only one that tied me back to the foundation. Ironically, the only one they needed to survive. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent a short note to my attorney, along with a file of documentation I'd been keeping for nearly a year. Every contribution, every wire, every shred of proof I had ever been there. She reviewed it in silence, then said, if you want leverage, now is the time. But I didn't want leverage, I wanted closure. I scheduled a meeting with the board. Not in my name, of course. The silent partner who had helped me acquire those forgotten shares made the request. The agenda was simple review of financial liabilities, legal exposure, and pending compliance issues. When I entered the room 5 minutes early, dressed in quiet black, he was already there. He didn't recognize me at first, or maybe he didn't want to. He was mid-sentence, trying to downplay the freeze as a clerical misunderstanding when I sat down across from him. And then I said, it wasn't a misunderstanding, it was fraud, and I have the records to prove it. Silence followed. He turned slowly, that same smile, faltering, now cracking at the edges. Rachel, what are you? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I slid the folder across the table. Financial statements, fake vendors, expense reports with blacked out names and dates, the kinds of things auditors love, the kinds of things that don't disappear just because someone wants them to. I could sign that form, I said calmly. I could unfreeze the account. But then the investigation wouldn't happen, and I think it should. The room shifted. One of the board members coughed. Another looked away. His hands were shaking now, just slightly, like a man trying to pretend he's still in control of a fire he didn't see starting. I'll make it right, he said under his breath. Just tell me what you want. I stood. I already took it. His eyes widened. I bought back 22% of this company 3 months ago. Through proxies, through people you never bothered to remember. So what I want is already mine. And then I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't turn for effect. I just walked out the way I'd once walked away from the lawyer's table, quiet, steady done. Because revenge isn't always a fire. Sometimes it's just a record kept, a call made, a meeting taken, and a signature withheld until it's too late to beg. It's been 15 months since that meeting. The company restructured, quietly of course. They issued a vague press release about leadership transition and compliance alignment. He stepped down citing stress. The board reached a settlement with the IRS. No one went to prison. That's not how it works in their world. But the brand never recovered. Clients pulled out. Investors cooled. The press moved on. And so did I. I never made a statement. Never posted about it. I watched as people pieced together their own versions of what happened. Some still don't know I was involved. That's fine. That's better. Power, I've learned, doesn't need to be seen to be real. I live differently now. I consult occasionally under a different name. High-value strategy for people who don't underestimate quiet voices. I don't chase visibility anymore. I don't network. I don't ask to be included. I go where I'm wanted and I leave when I'm not. There's peace in that. My apartment has more books than furniture. The windows are always open. I walk more. I speak less. There are days when I remember him, his laugh, his ambition, the way he used to say, "We like it meant forever." But there's no ache in it, just distance, just clarity. I've come to believe that the worst betrayal isn't being replaced. It's being rewritten, having your history, your worth, your work reduced to a footnote in someone else's story. But the beauty of silence, the kind I chose, not the kind forced upon me, is that it gives you space to write again. On your terms, in your name. I don't know if he thinks of me. I doubt it. Men like him move on quickly. They rewrite too easily. But I wonder if he ever pauses even for a second and remembers that the woman he erased was the same woman who built the stage he stood on. And that when the lights went out, it was her silence that made the audience leave.